we're going to change gears. So we've talked about creativity, we've talked about, how we can sort of make ads great again. It sounds like a political statement. But realistically, we are actually in a crisis, in a currency crisis. And I'm pretty excited to be talking today about something that's actually quite dear to my heart. And it's dear to my heart because if you haven't heard of the word attention, then you've been living under a rock for the last year in terms of how hard it is to gain people's attention and how difficult it is, in terms of being able to drive trust and creativity and be unmissable. So today I've been asked to talk about attention as a future-proof currency. So I'm not going to give you a lot of information about how to make your ads more attentive. What I'm actually going to talk about, which is, I guess I've been studying it for probably about 12 years, is what will it take for us to change the audience measurement currency and, think about what's next. And it's not probably the answer that you think. So let's start here. So I'll give you a little bit of a background on the context of the problem that we're solving for, and then we'll move into the next phases. But why are new metrics becoming more and more important for marketers? Marketers are well aware, acutely aware, of how difficult it is to even get seen by a person. Although I do still struggle to, when someone says to me, prove to me why attention's important, I firstly want to punch them, and then I'll sort of explain to them, because if you don't have your ad seen, then you can't gain trust, you can't sell your brand will not grow, you will not gain mental availability, all sorts of things. So getting your ad seen by even a few is getting harder and harder, even in a fleeting second. And we see that in our own data. So we collect human data at scale through AI, through gaze-based and facial recognition, with privacy ticked. But our current currency is letting us down. And marketers are starting to sort of understand that it was built at a time when the internet was unregulated and the MRC stamp was brought in and at least did an amazing job of an ad having some sort of verified OTS. But our current currency is failing largely because what we're good at, which we were just talking about, is avoiding, right? So we're experts at avoiding. And a lot of that happens because of the functionality of the platforms that we actually buy into, right? So we know that one of the biggest causes of distraction is largely the functionality of the platform itself. So it's a real issue. So even in the data we see, around 75% on average of online ads that you've paid for with the currency you trust actually deliver you no human attention. So if you think about that, that's pretty scary. And I kind of go on and say, and this would be okay, so if that was a universal error, let's put it as error or gap if you want to be, nice about it, if that was consistent or transparent across all the different formats and platforms, that would be okay too, because what you do is you just, adjust it, you apply an index, and it'll all be great. But the problem we face is that this gap is different, right? So the currency is not generalizable across different boundary conditions, right? And if you know anything about currency, it needs to have those conditions brought into it, and so that you understand that the currency changes. I've got my Australian dollar and I know what it is in euro and I know what it is in UK, and I get that. But if a currency is not flexible or adaptive to those different boundary conditions, this is what you get. So you don't know when you go in and you buy against viewability data, whether it was seen 7% or whether it was seen 25% of the time. And that's a scary thing. So that's why our industry is in crisis in terms of measurement. So my background is audience measurement. So the other thing I want to talk about, and I heard many people, including amazing Sir John, talk about the importance of creative. I was on a podcast last night with Orlando Wood. I always get Orlando Bloom and Orlando Wood mixed up, but it was Orlando Wood. Sorry, Orlando, we love you. But did you know that each platform has its own attention elasticity? And we're starting to sort of understand what that means. And what this means is that the creative that you're told to go out and be more creative is actually tempered by the performance of that platform. And there's nothing you can do about it because the inherent nature of its functionality is the very thing that tempers that performance, right? So your creative has little chance to shine beyond this elasticity, if you like. And we see that more and more often. And we see, and you know, some of my colleagues in the industry talk about, you know, creative does drive attention. It does not. It plays within the boundaries of the platform that says, here's how much attention we'll give you. I mean, we have learned behaviour to avoid ads, and we can see that. So therein lies the problem we're solving for as a business, and has been a big part of my research as an academic, is the flow and effects from inequitable impressions. You think about it, because most people think, okay, well, you know, you're solving for a measurement business, you know, so indexing, great. But there's so many things that have a flow-on effect of inequitable impressions in your businesses. So everything we were talking about this morning, the ability of an ad to drive mental availability. We've just come off the back of doing it in 5 countries where we look at that the ability to gain mental availability is tempered by the performance of the platform. And worse, poor performing platforms not only give you less mental availability, but it actually drives more misattribution to your competitor. So how do you be unmissable when a platform allows you to be missable, right? So anything that equitable impressions you rely on, like share of voice, mental availability, MMMs, not just reach planning, this whole ecosystem is in a currency crisis. So how do we move forward as a currency? The first things first, and I think this was a consensus this morning, stop measuring inwards and start measuring outwards. The human's an interesting thing, you know, and we fail now to look outward at how humans behave. We're always considering device data as our go-to currency, and I think that was the easy default in 2014, and I pay tribute to those that built in those technologies. But I'm telling you now, scroll speed is said to be a predictor of attention, but guess what? It's not. It'll tell you if someone's looking at the screen, but it won't tell you if someone's looking at the ad. And we constantly, speaking of not being loyal, this whole concept of switching is constantly happening as the ad is appearing. No one's sitting there sustained looking at it, I'm telling you now. So scroll speed is said to be a predictor, it's not. Ad length is said to be a predictor, it's not. So the longer your ad does not bestow more attention, it actually drives more wastage. I got my attention with that one. Good job. And time on screen is said to be a predictor of attention. It's not. It's actually a predictor of non-attention and distraction. How often do you sit there and, because we can see it, so we do sort of, and it is GDPR compliant, so don't panic, but we sit there and we can see where someone's looking while they're on all these different platforms, right? And they hold the phone like this so that it doesn't go dark, and they're sitting there talking to people, but all of a sudden your money's going to this person who's looking distracted at someone else. So it's not a predictor of attention, it's a predictor of distraction. The other thing that happens is a lot of the aggregated products that we see in the attention space are based on this metadata. So that's going to fail us in the future as a currency. This is what human data looks like on the right. So there's a lot more sort of nuances with human behaviour when you actually look below the metadata that we collect. And human data does tell a different story. But what I will tell you though is also predictive. So we're calling it the shape of attention. We see systematic viewing clusters, and they actually do have strong, no surprises, if you understand how a human's viewing something, it actually has stronger relationships with outcomes than metadata alone. So the cluster, my book, my money is on that human attention clusters will actually be the new prediction or the backbone of a currency. The other thing you've got to remember is a functional currency and a functional attention currency needs good data, not Lego bricks. Now, the reason why I say that is not to, hopefully anyone from Lego is not here, or Nike, just saying, from before, is that there was this interesting infographic that's sort of doing the rounds in the last few months, and it was a graphic designer that built out an infographic and said, this is how easy it is to build product, because if you've got data and it's sorted and arranged and it's nicely presented, then therefore it's actionable. And how I look at that is, let's not rush this. Let's not rush to build product just because there's a land grab in attention right now. Because if the bricks are dodgy, the tower will fall, right? Same with attention product. If the data is not robust, you will risk infected systems and meaningless outcomes because you're ingesting that data into your systems and your reach and frequency planning and whatever else you're doing. So be super careful and super fussy about the data, and not just about the data that you collect, but also the knowledge that sits around that. I'm a trained researcher, so for me, I'm not convinced of an outcome unless I understand all the things that go around it, right? Not just a single instance of, wisdom, and I put it out there. In fact, what is good data? I start with inspiration from this man called Marcus Vitruvius. My husband's an architect, and we were talking about this randomly just before I wrote the book a couple of years back. And this man built guiding rules on best practice architecture and engineering. And his whole philosophy is the guiding rules that lead to an endurance of structures. I mean, what a better place than Athens about endurance of structures, right? And he said to abide by these rules will prevent structures from falling to decay. And the Vitruvian man is an outcome of that. So it's about symmetry and form and all these sorts of things. So what I've kind of come out with as an academic, I guess, in the space is we should have guiding rules as a currency moving forward, as an attention currency. It's not a currency yet. It is metrics at the moment. But my humble opinion, here are some rules for good attention data. It needs to be human, no brainer, right? Let's not rely on metadata, let's look out. It needs to be privacy safe. We're dealing with humans here. So, you have to be super careful about the scale of the ability for us to spy, because there are some spyware products out there now. And so those are the sorts of things that make me worried. So when we collect data, it costs us more because of the nature of the opt-in, right? It has to be natural because you can train people to pay attention to do some sort of viewing system, but it might not even be in a natural environment. So it has to be completely natural. It has to be accurate because you can easily send systems off on the wrong path. So was it looked at or was it not? What are the error around? Is it consistent? So my background, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm originally from Ehrenberg Bass Institute. So my whole background is about generalizability is the key for future, for laws. And so we look for that in our own business. So it won't be until we've seen the same findings across, maybe 5 or 6 countries, or at least different times, different boundary conditions, then we release it. So those are the sorts of things I think which will take us forward to a attention future. So as we build attention-based audience measurement category, guiding rules around the data quality must be followed. Only then will an attention economy endure. With all of that said, this is my last couple of points. What will it take to make an attention currency functional? Because at the moment, people use the word currency, but really they mean measures, because there's a big difference between measures and a currency. So we're still a measurement business. We're not a currency business yet. A currency takes 3 things. I'm a researcher, so I did a whole lot of work on, what does it take to be a currency across, the American dollar, and, Bitcoin's a classic. So there are 3 things that seem to be the key to be a currency. One is about value. Why is it important and what problem does it solve? So us as a business, so we've only productized, to be honest, in the last 18 months, because the years before that, my job was to make sure that attention was A, different to viewability, it sure is, and B, whether it's valuable to brands. Is it really valuable? And it sure is. Stability is about this boundary condition that I was talking about. So is it stable across boundary conditions? If I go to collect in one country Will the conditions be much the same as another country, or does your model fail? How stable is attention, and how adaptable is it to when media changes? Because I'm telling you now, the minute Facebook or Google or anybody changes a format, even the tiniest bit, in terms of an aspect ratio, or the nature of whether they have sound on or off, the majority of them have sound off as a default, so I'm not sure how you build out an audio brand. How reliable are your models? Will it fail? And lastly, unity is about the collective agreement from the WHO. So collective agreement on data standards, on privacy, on usage, on accreditation, on compliance. These three things have to happen together because it's a dysfunction if you have two and not three, right? And we've seen that through history of time. So they need all three to make sure that it's future-proof. So economics, Attention Economics 101 from Professor Karen Nelson-Field. If we don't look outward, no value will come from change. If we don't use quality data, no stability will be established. If we don't bring key stakeholders in, no unity will be gained. That's my lesson for today. Thank you, mic drop. Thank you.